Welcome to Getting Personal with Plant Medicine. I'm your host, Diana Krach, and today I am joined by Dr. Silver, who is the Chief Veterinary Officer of Real Mushrooms, the Real Mushroom Science Team. How are you doing today, Dr. Silver?
It's nice to be here.
Good.
Your signal just froze there. I don't know what you were hearing there.
Oh, I think we're fine.
Okay.
So, Dr. Silver,
Yes.
we have discussed on this show before how CBD can interact with pet health, but we haven't gotten into all of the different ways that plant medicine and earth medicine can work with pets. What inspired you to integrate herbal and nutraceutical medicines into your veterinary practice?
Well, I'm an old timer. I graduated from vet school a while ago in the early 80s. And at that time, I thought I had learned everything I needed to know. But I found that after a few years out in practice, maybe 3 years or so, 5 years, I started finding myself frustrated because there were some cases that would come into my exam room that the tools that I had been taught, I thought I was taught some pretty good tools in school, pharmaceuticals and everything else, prescription diets, those things just didn't seem to help some of these patients. And so I started looking for other answers out of my frustration. And I started, first of all, looking at natural diets and found a book by a Dr. Pitcairn back in 1982 that published in 82 that actually gave some recipes and some descriptions. And I started just kind of doing it from the book, so to speak. At that time, nutrient profiles, were much higher in carbohydrates than now we understand the negative influence that carbohydrates can have in terms of promoting inflammation, and maybe sometimes digestive disorders and things. What I found was what was really amazing was that with just changing diet in many of these patients, I started to see some benefits and some changes, even without doing anything different as far as adding herbs or a different medication or whatever. So that was very encouraging and got me looking at other things. And in the place that I was at that time, I became aware of a group of herbalists that would have meetings every week. They'd go for herb walks, identify herbs, and they'd talk about making the herbs into little medicines and stuff like that. And so I started learning plant identification, which I had actually learned in vet school when we were learning to identify poisonous plants. And what's interesting about plants and poisonous plants is that many poisonous plants are actually great medicines. It's just a matter of dosage,
That's what I'm learning right now. I'm fascinated by it, and those walks sound amazing, by the way.
Yeah. So I learned quite a bit at the time, and I really resonated with one herb. I really resonated with catnip. And at the time, I had a nervous stomach, and so I started. And catnip grows a lot here in Colorado, probably grows everywhere a lot. And so I started making some tinctures out of it, and found that it actually soothed my own nervous stomach. So that was good. And then it just kind of I just started adding on. Then I found that there were several groups of veterinarians. They were in the early stages, the American Holistic Veterinary Medical Association, for one, and International Veterinary Acupuncture Society that I joined, and they had classes where you'd learn acupuncture, you'd learn holistic medicine or things like that. So I started attending these classes and these conferences and just gaining more tools and more experience as time went on. And then somewhere back there, I was contacted by a company called RX Vitamins that asked me to formulate products for them. And I'd done a little bit of formulating, just kind of, on the fly, shooting from the hip, as I needed to maybe make a product, maybe make a pharmaceutical into something more palatable, or maybe add some herbs and try to make those palatable, that sort of thing.
Not to interrupt, I just have that just made me think of a question really quickly, if you don't mind. Is that considered compounding?
No, that's considered compounding is when I might take a pharmaceutical, let's say, and mix it with some sort of a liquid that had a good taste so that it would be more likely to be accepted by the animal.
Okay.
That's compounding. And so that's what I started doing. But it just kind of got me interested in being more inventive with what I was making. And I've always had a great passion for cooking. And I somehow found that putting together these formulas for the pets was a lot like cooking in terms of combining ingredients and combining ingredients that were compatible and combining ingredients that would be tasty or, would be acceptable to the animal. So I really got into the formulating part and I stayed in practice, but I continued to work for this company for 25 years till they were sold. I did 40 different products over 25 years, and I introduced CBD to veterinarians through this company. And when I did, it was back in the beginnings of it all. The company's income doubled.
Wow.
Seriously, within a year. Because everyone wanted it, and no one had it, and we did.
Wow.
That's an ideal situation.
Yeah.
So, and I learned a heck of a lot from the veterinarians that were using it, from my own use of it, and then of course from all the studies I did, and then I had to start teaching it to veterinarians who have a very high bar, high standard as far as evidence and science, And so in the process of teaching, I learned even more and became actually well known for my expertise in CBD. I even developed, after I left that company, I even developed my own product line of branded CBD products that actually contain another cannabinoid called CBG. And we could talk about that, as we morph into talking about the plants a little more. So basically,
CBG is the hero. It gets brought up in almost every episode that we talk about. CBD is CBG.
It's a very powerful.
Yeah, I love it.
and because it is the parent compound from which both THC and CBD. Now, to be absolutely correct, CBGA, the acidic raw form of CBG, is the parent compound for both the raw form of CBD, CBDA, and the raw form of THC, THCA. But it's still so. So what's cool about CBG is that it shares similar properties to THC without being psychotropic, and similar properties to CBD. And so that's kind of where it has even more value than CBD. But CBD is so easy to come by on the plant. It's obvious why we started looking at CBD as the industry got better at doing things and had more money as they were selling more CBD, and there was a lot more competition. The industry started looking at how they could work with some of the other cannabinoids, the many other cannabinoids and terpenes that are found in the cannabis. And so that's where, so then they were able to actually alter the genetics of plants so they wouldn't have the enzymes that would convert the CBG to the THC or CBD, so you would stay with a high CBG in the plant. And that's how we're able to get it now. It's a bit more expensive because of that, but it is quite effective. We get great reports about it, from my own products. But anyway, so I was with this company for 25 years. They wound up selling during the pandemic and let me go, as oftentimes is the case. I wished I would have liked to have stayed with the company, but they didn't make it hospitable for me to stay, shall I say. So I said, and I'm not done. I know I'm not. I've got a daughter in college, so I reached out to another company that I had worked with while I was developing products for RX Vitamins, this mushroom company, Real Mushrooms, and their parent company called Namex. They're a Canadian company, and they grow their mushrooms under USDA organic standards, and they're a very high quality product that this company makes. They have over, I think they've got about 11 or 12 different mushroom species that they cultivate and extract into standardized compounds, so we know how much beta glucan is in these powders that this company creates. So I've been with this company now for 3 years, and I'm in the middle of formulating a bunch of products for pets. Started with a few basic single mushroom products and just kind of redesign them so they'd be more acceptable to pets, smaller capsules, soft chews, that kind of thing. And now we're working on, I've got 5 products in the pipeline. One product we're going to probably launch within the next month that are going to be powders that are scoopable, that can be just put on top of a pet's food. And I make sure, because I'm pretty good at formulating and pretty good at cooking, I make sure that they're all tasty as well.
I
So
was
we
going to
try
ask
to,
about that. So to that
yeah,
point, can we talk
yeah.
about how because I am growing lion's mane and several other mushrooms, that functional mushrooms, that I would love to give my dog. And he is
Mhm.
extremely picky. So, first, can you talk about maybe one or two success stories that you have in with the functional mushrooms and your clients? And secondly, how quickly do they adapt to the taste? I mean, what has that journey been like?
So, speaking of lion's mane,
Yeah,
uh, dogs as they get older, they get this sundowners thing, where they're kind of like a geriatric
that's where
senility.
mine is right now. Yes. Like,
Veterinarians have a word for that. We call that canine cognitive disorder, or CCD.
oh,
One of my products is targeted towards that. It won't be out for a while, though. But lion's mane alone by itself could be very helpful for that condition. And there's an extract of a special antioxidant that's found in lion's mane and other mushrooms like oyster mushroom called ergothioneine. We call it ergo for short because it's
mm-hmm.
a tongue twister. That also can help a lot with cognitive health. So, yeah, I mean, for instance, there was one patient who was older and had that cognitive thing, but also had the beginnings of what we call degenerative myelopathy, which is a lot like ALS in the dog, in that they start to get paralyzed as they get this autoimmune kind of problem that goes in their spinal cord. And so we were trying the lion's mane for that, because that's even more serious. They can't get up and walk. Um, and it didn't work that great for the degenerative myelopathy. It's a pretty tough cookie. But the dogs did start to find the dog door. They did start to find where their dog food bowl was. Things that we observe in dogs that have this kind of cognitive impairment. We started to see some improvement with that, and we tried a few other animals. And so we know that lion's mane can be very helpful for that. And ergo, as being even more, ergo also being very good for that as well. So, as far as the taste, we're kind of skipping to some more, how to do things. So I need to give a little basic information first about mushrooms in general. And mushrooms are very sturdy. They've got they're great foods, by the way. They're good paleo foods. They're good keto foods. Very healthy. They're high in protein and very good quality protein. They're also high in fiber, but low in fat and low in carbohydrates. And the fiber that they contain is of two types. One is, but the fiber is what makes their cell wall so sturdy. I don't know if you've ever seen photos of a mushroom that's rising up, and it's so strong it's actually able to push its cement paver up. Just as one mushroom can push that cement paver up. I've seen some photos on Google that way, and the beta glucans are a form of undigestible fiber that is part of the fiber in the cell wall of the mushroom. And then there's something called chitin. And you're probably familiar with chitin if you've ever had crab or lobster, because that hard shell is made primarily of chitin. It's a very sturdy type of fiber. It's the second most common fiber after the cellulose that we find in plants. And so chitin itself gets degraded by the bacteria in the bowel into a form of glucosamine. So and that form of glucosamine works directly on the bowel to help improve bowel function. And the beta glucans also serve as food for the microbiome, as does the chitin. So we tend to see mushrooms having, in addition to the benefits we think of for cognition or immune system, that they also have this huge digestive benefit and this benefit for the microbiome, which we are now learning seems to be in charge of almost everything having to do with our health or with diseases. Um, so, so when someone tells me that they want to give a fresh mushroom, like you are growing, probably you got those little cubes that have already been inoculated, and you just water it and watch the stuff come up. They're a lot of fun. Um, they are. Um, but the mushroom itself has so much fiber in it, as I mentioned, that that if you were to eat it raw, you would get almost no benefit from it. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, some mushrooms have slightly toxic elements to them. Even our little white button mushrooms have something called agarotine in it, which can be mildly toxic or carcinogenic. It's destroyed by cooking. It's also destroyed by prolonged storage in a refrigerator over a week.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't worry about it. But those little raw mushrooms you see on the salad bars, they really, they're more window dressing than actually something that's nutritious. So in order to make a mushroom be both nutritious and medicinally valuable, you have to cook it. And you need to cook it to break down that cell wall in order to release all of its good stuff. So when Real Mushrooms or parent company Namex takes their mushrooms and they dry them and then they powder them, they then take that powder and put it in water, and they do what's called a hot water extraction, which means that they heat it to 90 degrees centigrade. That's 100 degrees centigrade is boiling. So it's pretty hot, but it's not boiling, maybe 200 degrees, just about there, for 2 hours. That's a long time, and that breaks down completely. And then they're able to take that liquid and they can spray dry it, and they can separate the liquid out and concentrate it and make it really concentrated to go into little capsules, or they can keep it as a powder with all that good fiber in it, which is what I prefer in terms of the mushrooms that I am products I'm making for pets, because that fiber is so important for the microbiome. So when you get your lion's mane to be mature and harvested, then you're going to have to slice it up and you're going to have to cook it in order for your dog to eat it. And it might be too chewy for your dog. Then again, your dog might like it chewy. Picky dog, it's hard to say. Mouthfeel sometimes is more important than actual taste. People like the taste of lion's mane. It's considered to be a prized edible mushroom. Many people will take it and kind of slice it and kind of fry it up as steaks. It's really kind of cool. You can put cheese on top of it or bread it. I mean, there's all kinds of cool ways you can cook the lion's mane. Personally, when I'm cooking mushrooms, not so much as part of my meal, but because I want to also get the medicinal benefit, I'll usually dice them pretty small. That way they're guaranteed to cook more fully, completely, and I don't have to cook them for 2 hours. Maybe I can just saute them for 15 or 20 minutes instead and still get some medicinal benefit, as well as kind of softening them a bit. So you may find, and your listeners may also find, that feeding fresh mushrooms is something that a dog just doesn't really take to.
Yeah.
And so that's where a company such as Real Mushrooms comes in, because we got it already processed. We have it in capsules. It may be your dog won't take the powder at all in the food. It's pretty picky. And maybe as it becomes more cognitively impaired, it maybe even becomes more picky, So
That's
yeah,
true.
so using capsules is a good idea. But the powder itself is, it's so concentrated that, let's say for each 10 pounds, you only need to put in 1/8 of a teaspoon of powder.
Oh,
That's not very much,
yeah. He doesn't even weigh 10 pounds.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So it may be even easier just to put a little sprinkle of powder in there and trying to get something in his mouth, like a liquid or whatever. And the tinctures, which we don't make, would be good for a little dog. But the problem is that the beta glucans, which are the most powerful part of it, don't really dissolve in water very well. You have to kind of shake it. It becomes like a slurry. And that also becomes a palatability issue. So I personally believe that the powders do the best job as far as administration. But I also make these soft chews, which
Mm.
the relaxed chews, which contain lion's mane. as well as another mushroom, and they also contain nutraceuticals that are good for the mind. Things like tryptophan, and taurine, and theanine, and herbs like catnip and valerian. It's been designed to help calm animals, but it could also be helpful, with that problem. Um, and we also have something similar like the daily dog, which is a powder that also contains the lion's mane, but it also contains 6 other mushrooms, as well as support for the microbiome and detoxification. So it's worth it to try to give that to your dog, but you're not going to be getting a very large amount into him when it might be better to give him a mushroom. And after we're done here, Diana, I'd like to send you a gift, some samples of some of our vitamins product. I worked at a company for 25 years. Some of our real mushrooms products, because I'm sure you'll like them a lot.
Oh, I bet I will. I'm so excited because the one thing that I really love about, or one of the things I really love about learning about plant medicine is that there are so many things that help both humans and animals. And it seems like an obvious statement, but the more conversations I have out in the world, the more I realize there are people who are still very skeptical about giving kids and kids as well, and animals CBD and functional mushrooms. So what do you have to say to people who are hesitant or skeptical about embracing plant medicine for their pets?
Well, I'm not really someone to convince people of these things. It's if and these days, in the in our public discourse between people, there are different camps of beliefs. And I don't know that I really want to challenge somebody's beliefs if they're in a position where they have an animal who is in need of something and everything they're doing is not working, and I think that CBD might help. I would suggest that. But that old saying that you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I don't think there's a way of convincing people that don't want to be convinced. Is all. I think the best way to convince someone is for them to try it in their own animal and see if it works or not. And one of the things about CBD and mushrooms that I've been amused to observe, but is kind of human nature, is that people have already assigned to CBD and to mushrooms panacea status. That means whatever ails you, these guys are going to do it for you.
A snake oil.
And the reality is, but the reality is they do have a very wide range of activity, and they can do quite a bit, but they can't do everything. So I get questions about, many, many questions every day. Will a mushroom help my dog who has this condition? And we don't know many of these conditions. I can guess, that based on what I know about what is the pathology of that condition, I might know that a mushroom could help with that pathology. Let's say it's an infection, Well, we know that the beta-glucans improve the immune system's ability to fight infection, just as the beta-glucans help the immune system's ability to fight cancer. The beta-glucans don't themselves fight the cancer, but the immune system does, which is really the strongest, medicine there is if you've got an immune system that's working. And because of the benefit mushrooms have to the microbiome and how important we know the microbiome is to the immune system, that would be a sure fit. I could give them the science. I could explain things to them. And I've written a book to try not to convince people, but to give people guidance so they can know how to use mushrooms or cannabis or other plants or even conventional medicine for 6 or 7 different types of conditions. I've got a bunch of stories in there. We can mention that a little bit later as well. So I also wanted to say that, there's a concept out there called One Health. I don't know if you've heard that or not. Basically, what it means is that human health, animal health, we're totally interrelated. Many of the same diseases humans have, animals have very similar diseases. In fact, researchers will use certain animal diseases as models for studying human diseases. And so I'm in the process of writing a blog right now, kind of linking these things together. A lot of people now are feeding home prepared meals, for their pets, there's no reason why when you're fixing a meal for yourself, you can't fix be fixing the same food for your pet.
My
just
dog
using
seconds that. He's not in the room right now, but he seconds that.
just using the appropriate proportions
Right.
for that pet and adding some extra calcium because they need calcium with their food. We do too, but we don't think to add it. And some good fatty acids, some good fish oil, maybe some flaxseed, those kinds of things to help improve the overall quality, of the food.
It is kind of funny how people like compartmentalize pet health and their health. Like in a
Yeah.
way where they put all of this effort into making sure their dog's coats are shiny and tangle free, but then they throw their hair up without any products or anything to protect it from the sun. And I think that I'm not sure if that falls under the what you're just talking about, but it seems like if we could all just kind of apply what we do to ourselves the
Mm-hmm.
same we do our pets and vice versa, we might all be better off.
Well, pets have become, in our culture, our four-legged children, and we want to convey the same benefits to our little four-legged children as to ourselves and our two-legged children. So it's not uncommon. That is part of the One Health, and part of that One Health is also that emotional bond that we see between people and pets. It's so very important, and it's as important to the pet as it is to the human as well. And they thrive for that bond, and that bond helps keep them healthy.
Oh.
But yeah, it's I've always been surprised that when I started that, I've been a vet for a long time. I graduated in '82, and I was one of the first vets to suggest home prepared meals. And and people would say, "You mean people food?" I shouldn't feed the dog food. So, I mean, that's what you're talking about, the
And they're still
compartmentalization.
saying that. I mean,
I
they
know.
do even in the commercials and things like that. It's wild if you really think about it. I mean, we won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but when you start to look into what they actually put in the food, you know.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yes.
And where they're sourcing the food, and their transparency and credibility. The big box companies, seem to be promoting just their own bottom line, and not really doing as much as they could to improve the health of their pets. I'm still surprised to see corn is the first ingredient in many dry pet foods. It's like, really?
Yes, and then sometimes their own like anyway. We
Yes,
don't
yeah.
want to gross people out.
That's a whole other tangent. Maybe that'll be another day. We can talk about that.
So you're in Colorado, where the legalization of medical cannabis has been the case for quite some time, and it's a little
Yes.
bit more accepted there than it may be in other parts of the country. How does that shift impact your veterinary practice? I mean, are people more open to this idea when they come to see you, or is that kind of expected when
Well,
they?
many would actually come in, asking for that and know about my expertise. But it really is a phenomenon that is throughout the country, really, except for certain states that are particularly conservative. I'm thinking especially about the Bible Belt, and Idaho. Idaho's actually made CBD illegal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've done a lot of things.
Kind of crazy
Anyway,
that
yeah.
way. I mean, I can understand, they're trying to, their thing with THC, and the U.S. Congress is about to reschedule THC anyway from being a Schedule 1, which makes it verboten, to a Schedule 3, which makes it much more accessible, and I think should allow banking to begin, which is I think one of the big banes of the industry is that they can't bank, and that's and getting credit and things like that are also difficult for them. So that'll help the industry to grow more once the our poor broken Congress passes that bill. Anyway, we won't go there either. But I travel a lot. I speak in a wide variety of different states. I go to different expos, pet expos, and veterinary conferences, and it really the use of CBD is really quite widespread, even to the extent that I think it's a little boring.
Yeah.
It's been around for so long. People go, "Oh yeah, CBD, ho hum."
It's funny you say that because I'm in Maryland and we are adult use here, and we're in the Northeast, which can be a little bit more on the progressive side, I guess, depending on where you are. And still, people act when I hand out CBD samples and things like that for pets. It's like a whole new world. I'm surprised by it that people are
Mhm.
still brand new to the idea. I mean, I'm seeing certain like local veterinarians, they are embracing it more, but just in general, I would say mostly people are still very skeptical of it, and I only can get people to really convert when they're in a desperate situation. And I say, just put this on them or just give them this oil or whatever.
So you really were asking me that question in a sense for your own guidance because that's
Yeah.
a problem. That's a problem that you experience. Yeah, I get that. There's also another issue with CBD, which is that because cannabis or THC has been a Schedule One, even though CBD is federally legal based on the Farm Bill of 2018, um, many veterinarians have been advised by their veterinary medical boards, and these are the boards that actually control their licensing.
Mm.
So, veterinarians don't want to lose their license; that's their livelihood. Have warned veterinarians not to use even CBD
Wow.
because it would be hard to defend if charges were brought up against them. Because we get this, a veterinarian sees a lot of animals, and sometimes those animals are connected to humans who aren't always that great, you know, and maybe they have a little cognitive disorder of their own, and something happened. You send the CBD home with the animal, and something happens to the animal, and they blame you because of the CBD, even though it wasn't the CBD. But it's a he said she said thing, and then you find yourself in trouble. So for a lot of veterinarians, they just don't want to take the risk, as compared to other veterinarians who are willing to take the risk because they see the CBD as maybe the only panacea that would be working for this pet's problem. Maybe their kidneys and liver are shot and they can't take NSAIDs and they still have some mobility issues. And so we're trying to use the CBD to improve that. So that's one reason why it's not as widely used. And with when and if the Congress ever passes this rescheduling, that should also change how veterinarians' attitudes, because most veterinarians have Schedule 2 DEA licenses. They can handle Schedule 3s. So that opens things up a lot for the veterinarian as
Oh,
well.
great. That's
Yeah,
good. I didn't even
let's
think
hope that
about it that
happens.
way, to be honest. I didn't even consider it with the pets, but that's another way where this could be a good thing.
Yeah,
So,
I think so. I think so.
well, it has been such a pleasure talking to you today. I've learned so much, and I hope that you come back anytime. Before we go, can you tell people where they can find you and how they can support you?
Okay, sure. Well, first of all, I'm Chief Veterinary Officer for Real Mushrooms, and their website that we can post on your podcast will be available. And they're a great source of all these different mushrooms. But I have my own e-commerce site. I call it Well Pet Dispensary,
Hmm.
and I'll give you that link too. And I'll even give you a discount code that your listeners can use for my own website. And on that website, I also sell the Real Mushrooms products, not as many as the company itself sells. And I sell my own branded CBD CBG blend. I've got two tinctures. One, it's a 2-to-1 CBD CBG blend. One tincture has 2,700 milligrams of cannabinoids in it. The other has 750. They're both completely organic and have used medium chain triglycerides. They're also both broad spectrum. And I go with broad spectrum because there are some dogs who are extremely sensitive to THC and can run into problems. And
I'm
I think
glad
that
you
this,
brought that up. I feel like that's not really discussed enough, but yes,
well,
please.
well, there's, yeah, there are some people there that are just saying, broad spectrum is worthless, and that's not true, because you still get the entourage effect, because you still have all the other minor cannabinoids and terpenes in there. You just don't have the THC. And my point is that the small amount of THC in a full spectrum product, and many of them are much less than 0.3% THC anyway, is really not that much. And if you really, and THC is a great cannabinoid, although it's got the legal issues and the psychotropic issues, and it is great for pain. It's great for a number of things, cancer too, but it needs to be given in higher amounts than what we see in full spectrum. In my book, and I've written a book which is going to be published very soon. I call it "There's a Mushroom for That." And in this book, I give 7 stories about pets that I've treated, 7 or 8 stories about different conditions like allergies, arthritis, anxiety, cancer, bowel problems, epilepsy, and wellness. And I talk about how I used mushrooms, how I used cannabis, what dosages to use. But in the book, I also describe in detail how you can start your pet using THC in a way that doesn't create a problem. So you can escalate the dosage of THC high enough that you might be able to actually relieve pain without having them get all gorked out. So for a state like Maryland, and so many states now have gone recreational adult use, where anyone with a 21 and older ID can go into a dispensary and pick up something with THC and give it to their dog and send them straight to the ER, because dogs are so sensitive to THC. Many of them they'll concern their owner so much because they might collapse or they have to say ataxia. They take them into the ER. Most vets, that's all they ever see about THC is the animals on the overdoses. So I explain how you can get started with the THC in a way that's not going to cause that to happen if THC is needed to treat your pet. And I have one story in there with cancer where that's exactly what we did. We had a very successful outcome. So anyway, so that's going to be coming out soon as well, and we'll have announcements for that. And you said that it might come back. We could talk about it some more. And then I have my branded line of tinctures, but I also have soft chews that contain the CBD and the CBD, but they also contain lion's mane, and they also contain another mushroom called cordyceps, and the combination of these two is really good. So that's kind of where the people can find me.
Great.
And I'll give you all that information.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This episode was produced by Your Highness Media. Audio editing done by James Krach and sponsored by mitragaya.com. Be sure to subscribe and rate our podcast if you haven't yet. And subscribe to our Your Highness Media newsletter on Substack for everything new going on in the Your Highness Media world.